Chapter 1, Part 13. Our minds, when unburdened by prejudice and open to inquiry, become powerful instruments of reason and deduction. Coupled with this is our inherent power to choose our reactions, values, and paths. This is where true agency lies. We can choose to succumb to external pressures, or we can choose to align ourselves with our deepest convictions, guided by our internal compass of logic and intuition. When we cultivate faith in these intrinsic systems, we gain an unparalleled advantage in navigating the intricate waters of life. We become less susceptible to the manipulation of external forces, less swayed by fleeting trends, and more resilient in the face of adversity. Our breath provides calm, our senses offer insight, and our thoughts and choices empower us to forge our own destiny. These are not tools we acquire. They are tools we are born with, waiting to be acknowledged and utilized. By honoring these universal gifts, we tap into an inexhaustible source of wisdom and strength, capable of guiding us through any storm and toward the shores of a life lived on our own terms. Without further ado, I must say this is a time of great light, a time of obtaining that wonderful objective of our intrigue and determination. We have found within ourselves a great light in this life, a knowledge that hope is the eternal lamplight of our lives, and a viewport that brings courage and accountability to those great lights we continuously depend on. It just makes sense to hope in tomorrow, although I have written much in my musings about the holiness of the present moment. However, it is in the thought of tomorrow that we dare to dream, and in such dreaming lies the lifeblood of our goals and wonder. By standing on such pillars of hope, we can eternally nurture a beautiful anticipation for tomorrow. Our dreams are not mere figments. They are the blueprints of our aspirations, the whispers of our potential, urging us to reach higher. In the tapestry of our existence, each thread of hope weaves a pattern of resilience and possibility, reminding us that the future is a canvas waiting for the strokes of our ambitions. All this being said, we take refuge in the here and now, knowing that when gathered together, our Lord is within our midst. In these moments of unity and shared faith, we find strength and solace, and it is here that our eternal hope is enshrined. Let us embrace this light, let us cherish this hope, and together let us stride boldly into the promise of tomorrow, guided by the unwavering love that binds us. Faith and the First Spark, a reflection on miracles and the Big Bang. As believers in God, we walk with reverence upon a path paved with miracles. Our scriptures, traditions, and inner lives are woven with events that defy the purely mechanistic laws of matter and time. We believe that a sea parted for an exiled people, that water turned to wine in a moment of need, that the blind have seen, the dead have risen, and that the infinite divine clothed itself in human form out of love. These are not stories of mere magic, but signs, sacred disruptions in the ordinary that point to a deeper order, a spiritual architecture humming behind the visible world. To the modern scientist, such claims are often met with skepticism. We are told that the universe must follow the rules of physics, chemistry, and biology. Evidence is king, and belief without measurable proof is at best wishful thinking. Yet curiously, when science attempts to explain the very beginning of everything, the genesis of space, time, matter, and energy, it rests its case on a singular, all-encompassing mystery, the Big Bang. It is here that a paradox arises. The Big Bang theory, now widely accepted among cosmologists, posits that roughly 13.8 billion years ago, all of reality exploded into being from a point of infinite density and zero volume, what is called a singularity. Before this moment, there was no space, no time, no before in any meaningful sense. Just nothing, and then everything. And what caused it? Silence. Even the most disciplined scientist must concede, we don't know. No telescope can peer behind that veil. No equation can fully explain the why. The very laws of nature, those inviolable constants that govern the movement of stars and the dance of atoms, were born after the bang. Thus, science, which often demands that every effect has a cause, asks us here to believe in one grand exception, that something, everything, came from nothing. It is, in essence, a miracle. And so we ask, lovingly and without scorn, if it is acceptable to believe in this one supreme miracle, the sudden creation of the cosmos from a void, why then is it unreasonable to believe in others? Why is it more rational to believe in a silent, spontaneous spark than in a spark spoken into being by a word? The believer does not reject science. Far from it. We cherish its insights, marvel at its discoveries, and use its tools to heal, build, and explore, but we also see its limits. We understand that the universe is not merely a machine, but a mystery, not only a sequence of causes and effects, but a symphony imbued with intention. The hand that set off the Big Bang may be the same hand that writes meaning into our lives and whispers to us in prayer. In truth, we are not so different. The scientist and the mystic both stare into the dark, trying to grasp the first light. One calls it energy. The other calls it God. Perhaps both are right. Perhaps the miracle at the beginning was not an exception to the rule, but the first sign of a deeper, more miraculous reality. And maybe, just maybe, the miracle continues. A time of great light. Embracing our inner radiance and shaping tomorrow. A time of great light. We live in a threshold moment, a crossing between the shadows of what has been and the radiant possibilities of what could be. To call this a time of great light is not to deny the presence of struggle, but to affirm that amidst uncertainty, a higher brightness dawns. This light is not always external. It begins within, as a flicker of awareness, a spark of clarity, a whisper of divinity that says, "There is more." Each of us is a lantern bearer, entrusted with nurturing our portion of that great radiance. The light we carry is not just for ourselves. It is meant to guide, to warm, and to awaken others. I invite the reader to honor their inner light as sacred, to see their very existence as a spark in the cosmic illumination. The eternal lamp, hope, is the eternal lamp that never burns out. Though winds of despair may threaten to extinguish it, it persists, softly, steadily, resolutely. Hope is not a wish, it is a discipline. It is showing up again and again when the outcome is uncertain. It is making choices rooted in belief, not fear. Hope teaches us to be accountable, to ourselves, our communities, and our shared humanity. In lighting the lamp of hope within, we become beacons for others, illuminating the path not by force, but by example. We share stories of those who carried light through their darkest nights and emerged stronger, brighter, transformed. The holiness of the present moment. We often chase the horizon, forgetting the sanctity of the ground beneath our feet. But the now is not empty. It is holy. It is where life actually happens. Here, we pause. We breathe. We remember that the sacred is not only found in temples or mountaintops, but in washing dishes, watching sunsets, and sharing laughter. Gratitude is the key that unlocks this holiness. Mindfulness makes it visible. By honoring the present, we find ourselves less burdened by the past and less anxious about the future. In the now, we remember we are alive, and that alone is a miracle worthy of reverence. The power of dreams. To dream is to touch the divine. Dreams are soul blueprints whispered into our hearts. They are not frivolous. They are sacred previews of what could be if only we dared. Ignite your imagination and view dreams not as distant illusions, but as invitations to co-create with life. We offer reflective prompts to uncover forgotten desires and hidden visions. For dreams are seeds, and when planted in hope and watered with action, they become legacies. In dreaming, we declare, "I believe the future can be beautiful, and I am willing to help make it so." Standing on pillars of hope, hope does not float aimlessly. It rests on pillars. Resilience, perseverance, faith. These are the scaffolding of the hopeful soul. These are individuals who stood strong when the ground trembled beneath them. We turn our gaze to community, the collective holding space for one another's trials and triumphs. Hope, when shared, becomes exponential. We find courage in knowing that we are not alone, and we become strong, not in spite of adversity, but because of it. To stand on hope is not naive, it is revolutionary. Weaving the tapestry of existence. Life is not a single thread. It is a magnificent tapestry, a cosmic weaving of all our stories, identities, choices, and callings. Your thread matters, and so does everyone else's. We celebrate diversity not as division, but as divine variation. Each culture, perspective, and path adds richness to the great design. We reflect on how our personal choices impact the weave, not just in what we create, but in how we relate. Compassion is the golden thread that binds us, and when we weave with love, the fabric of reality becomes stronger, more beautiful, and more just. The strength of unity. Unity is not uniformity. It is harmony among differences. When we gather not despite our differences, but because of them, we become stronger. The alchemy of community is how shared purpose turns isolation into solidarity. Through stories of collaboration, mutual aid, and interfaith dialogue, we highlight how unity uplifts. We are reminded that when many voices sing the same song, the melody becomes unshakable. And in unity, hope becomes not just a feeling, but a force. Embracing the light, there comes a time to stop waiting for change and to be the change. To stop admiring the light from afar and to embody it. This is that call. To embrace the light is to choose love over fear, truth over convenience, service over self-interest. It is to become the kind of person the world is waiting for. We explore daily practices that nourish this light: gratitude journals, acts of kindness, mindful listening, sacred rituals, and in doing so we move from inspiration to implementation. You are not just a seeker of light, you are its emissary. The promise of tomorrow, even now a new dawn is breaking. The horizon may be tinged with uncertainty, but it is also radiant with potential. The promise of tomorrow is not guaranteed, it is cultivated. We look forward, not with blind optimism, but with sacred intention. We affirm that the love we give today builds the world we inherit tomorrow. That justice pursued now becomes peace later. That hope practiced daily becomes destiny. Together we cast a vision for what could be: a more compassionate world, a more awakened humanity. And we walk toward it, step by radiant step, a journey together. And so, dear traveler, the journey continues. We have shared light, shared hope, shared dreams and disciplines, but most importantly, we have remembered that we are not alone. In each other, we find strength. In spirit, we find direction. In every breath, a chance to begin again. Let this final note be a blessing. May your light never dim. May your hope never fade. And may you always find companions on the path who remind you, the future is bright because we are walking toward it together. The symphony of silence, discovering divine harmony in stillness and everyday miracles. There is a sacred music in stillness, a symphony in silence that plays not through the ears, but through the soul. In our fast-paced world, silence often feels like a void, an absence, but to the spiritually attuned, it is a presence. The quiet of early morning, the hush of nightfall, the pause between heartbeats, these are sanctuaries where divine whispers reside. The sacred nighttime is not a realm of fear but of mystery. The stars shine their truths in darkness, and the moon reflects a gentler kind of light. I honor the darkness, not as an adversary of light, but as its canvas. Without it, we could never know contrast, never appreciate the illumination. Silence and night are not empty, they are full. Full of potential, full of grace, full of communion with the divine. Resilience through adversity. Adversity is not the end of the story. It is often the sacred forge in which character is shaped. Across every community, there are quiet warriors who rise from hardship, not with bitterness, but with brilliance. A single mother who turns tears into triumph. A neighborhood that bands together after tragedy to rebuild stronger than before. A generation that fights systemic injustice, not with hate, but with hope. When challenges are faced not in isolation, but together, with shared faith and collective strength, they become stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. Resilience is not just surviving, it is transforming adversity into a testimony, into song, into sacred power. The art of gratitude. Gratitude is more than manners, it is a state of being, a way of seeing. When we cultivate gratitude, we water the soul's garden. What seemed mundane becomes magnificent. What once felt insufficient becomes abundant. To say thank you is to affirm life's goodness, even in shadow. It shifts focus from what is missing to what is, and opens the heart to receive more. Spiritually, gratitude aligns us with the rhythm of grace. It is the language of the soul in prayer. Gratitude turns meals into feasts, strangers into family, and moments into miracles. The more grateful we are, the more we awaken to a world that is already holy. Bridging generations. In a world obsessed with the next new thing, we often forget the sacred continuity between generations. Wisdom is not only in books, it walks among us with silver hair and weathered hands. When elders share stories, they gift the young with roots. When the young share dreams, they gift elders with wings. Faith traditions that value both the ancient and the emerging are rich with balance and vision. Intergenerational connection is not nostalgia, it's necessity. The old dream forward, the young remember backward. Together they weave a tapestry of continuity, tradition, innovation, and shared sacred memory. The light of kindness. Kindness is the quiet miracle maker. A small gesture, a smile, a helping hand, a word of encouragement can echo through someone's life in ways we may never see. Kindness is not weakness, it is power restrained by love. Its ripple begins with one soul but can touch thousands. It transforms cultures, not through revolution, but through reverence for each other. In neighborhoods where kindness is practiced, walls fall and bridges rise. Children learn trust, elders feel seen, the weary find comfort. Kindness is a light that doesn't blind, it warms. Nature as a teacher. Nature speaks a language older than words. It teaches us to be present, to grow where planted, to change with the seasons. The tree doesn't hurry to bloom. The river doesn't argue with its path. From the bird that trusts the wind to the flower that reaches for the sun, creation reflects the Creator. Nature is both scripture and sacrament, and it calls us not only to observe, but to protect. Stewardship is spiritual. To care for the earth is to honor the divine artist whose signature is found in every petal, tide, and cloud. We are not separate from creation. We are part of it. To harm it is to harm ourselves. To cherish it is to return home. The journey of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a sacred paradox. It frees both the giver and the receiver. Yet it is often the hardest spiritual work. We clutch pain because it gives us identity, but it also binds us to the past. To forgive is not to forget. It is to remember differently. It is to reclaim power from the wound and turn the scar into wisdom. Forgiveness is a process, not a performance. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it needs help. But when it comes, it transforms bitterness into compassion and enemies into fellow travelers. Communities rooted in forgiveness are resilient. They don't deny wounds, but they refuse to let wounds define them. Forgiveness is a door. On the other side is freedom. Celebrating everyday miracles. Miracles are not rare. They are simply rarely noticed. The sunrise, a child's laughter, a kind word at just the right moment. These are not coincidences. They are divine appointments in disguise. To live spiritually is to live in awe. When we expect wonder, we begin to see it everywhere. The breath in our lungs, the chance meeting, the breakthrough after years of prayer, the subtle serendipities that guide our steps, these are everyday miracles. Each one an invitation to remember that we are loved and watched over. To celebrate these moments is to live in gratitude, humility, and awareness of the divine choreography always at play. The power of shared stories. Stories are sacred vessels. Through them, we pass down truth, culture, values, and vision. When we share our stories, our pain, our joys, our doubts, our dreams, we build bridges. Stories dissolve difference. They humanize, they heal. They let others know they are not alone. Faith, after all, is transmitted not just through theology, but through testimony. In diverse communities, shared stories create unity. In wounded communities, they foster healing. And in growing communities, they spark inspiration. Your story matters, not because it is perfect, but because it is real. Real stories move hearts, and moving hearts can move the world. Finding purpose in service. Service is the outer expression of an inner realization that we are connected. When we serve others, we encounter the divine not just in them, but through them. True service is not martyrdom, it is joy. It is humility in action. And it has a way of transforming both the one who gives and the one who receives. From feeding the hungry to comforting the lonely, from mentoring youth to caring for the earth, acts of service root us in purpose. Communities built on service thrive, not because they have no needs, but because their love answers those needs again and again. To serve is to say, I see you, I care, I'm with you. And sometimes that's the holiest message of all. Aslan's Triumph, the resurrection allegory in C.S. Lewis's Narnia, C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia is replete with Christian allegories, and perhaps the most profound and central of these is the character of Aslan, the majestic lion, as a symbol of resurrection. Through Aslan's sacrifice and subsequent return to life, Lewis powerfully communicates the essence of Christ's triumph over death, offering readers a tangible and emotionally resonant understanding of this core theological concept. The most overt instance of Aslan's representation of resurrection occurs in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Edmund Pevensy's betrayal to the White Witch places him under the penalty of death, according to the deep magic of Narnia. However, Aslan, through an act of selfless love, offers himself as a substitute for Edmund. The scene at the stone table is harrowing. Aslan is bound, shorn, mocked, and ultimately slain by the White Witch and her creatures. This brutal and seemingly final act of sacrifice directly mirrors the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, who, though innocent, took upon himself the sins of humanity and suffered death on the cross. The lamentations of Susan and Lucy, witnessing their beloved Aslan's demise, evoke the grief of Christ's followers at his death. However, the allegorical parallel deepens with Aslan's miraculous resurrection. As the sun rises on the morning after his death, Susan and Lucy find the stone table shattered and Aslan gone. Their despair quickly turns to overwhelming joy and wonder as Aslan reappears, larger and more glorious than before, having broken the power of death. As Aslan himself explains, though the witch knew the deep magic, there is a magic deeper still which she did not know. Her knowledge goes back only to the dawn of time. But if she could have looked a little further back into the stillness and the darkness before time dawned, she would have read there a different incantation. She would have known that when a willing victim who had committed no treachery was killed in a traitor's stead, the stone table would crack and death itself would start working backward. This deeper magic is a direct parallel to the Christian understanding of God's redemptive plan, where Christ's sacrificial death, due to his sinlessness, reverses the power of sin and death over humanity. Aslan's resurrection is not merely a return to life, but a new, victorious life that brings hope and renewal to all of Narnia. Following his reawakening, Aslan descends upon the witch's castle, breathing life back into the stone statues of Narnians who had been enchanted and frozen by her power. This act further solidifies his role as a bringer of new life, echoing Christ's resurrection, bringing spiritual life to those who were dead in their sins. The breaking of the stone table itself symbolizes the breaking of the old law and the ushering in of a new covenant of grace and forgiveness. Throughout the Chronicles, Aslan's presence is consistently associated with life, light, and restoration. His breath brings healing, his roar inspires courage, and his very being embodies the creative and redemptive power that overcomes darkness and decay. Even in later books, Aslan's appearances often signify moments of profound renewal, guidance, and spiritual awakening for the characters, continually reinforcing his identity as the ultimate source of life in Narnia. C.S. Lewis, a devout Christian, aimed to convey the core tenets of his faith in an imaginative and accessible way. By presenting the profound theological truth of resurrection through the majestic and lovable figure of Aslan, he allowed readers, particularly children, to grasp the weight and wonder of Christ's sacrifice and triumph. Aslan is not merely a representation of Jesus. He is, as Lewis himself stated, the Christ of Narnia, a truly incarnate divine figure within that world, whose death and resurrection offer an eternal promise of hope and renewed life for all who believe. Hamlet's invitation to wonder, more things in heaven and earth. In Act 1, Scene Fieth of Hamlet, Shakespeare delivers one of his most enduring lines through the troubled Prince of Denmark. "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." This line is spoken in the aftermath of Hamlet's encounter with his father's ghost, a supernatural revelation that shatters the boundaries of his friend Horatio's reasoned worldview. At first glance, it appears to be a simple rebuke of skepticism, but beneath it lies a profound meditation on the limits of human knowledge, the vastness of existence, and the humility required to navigate mystery. Context and literal meaning. Horatio, the rational scholar, is stunned by the ghost's appearance. Grounded in classical learning and Renaissance reason, he clings to what can be observed, measured, and explained. Hamlet, though educated in similar traditions, is thrust into a confrontation with the unknown. His statement to Horatio challenges the adequacy of any rigid worldview, especially one that denies or discounts phenomena simply because they are outside the bounds of accepted understanding. Here, philosophy does not refer only to metaphysical inquiry or academic discourse. In Shakespeare's time, it was a broad term that could include science, logic, natural law, and rational thought. Hamlet's point is that no matter how refined one's intellectual framework, reality will always contain more than it can account for. Epistemological humility. At its core, this quote is a call for epistemological humility, the recognition that our knowledge is limited and often incomplete. For every mystery we solve, new ones arise. Hamlet reminds us that the universe is not bound by the contours of human logic. The supernatural presence of the ghost, inexplicable within the bounds of Horatio's reason, becomes a symbol of the unknown that resists tidy explanation. In the modern age, this humility is more important than ever. Science has revealed the subatomic and the cosmic, mapped the genome, and explored consciousness. Yet the more we learn, the more we discover how much remains hidden. Dark matter, quantum paradoxes, and the riddles of subjective experience suggest that even our most sophisticated philosophies are tentative approximations. Hamlet's words echo through the centuries. There is always more. Imagination, mystery, and the human spirit. This line also honors the imaginative spirit that drives both art and science. The great leaps of human thought often come from a willingness to imagine realities beyond the present moment's consensus. Visionaries, from mystics to physicists, have all, in their own way, dreamed beyond the boundaries of inherited knowledge. Hamlet isn't merely dismissing Horatio's philosophy, he's expanding it, suggesting that true wisdom lies in openness to what lies beyond reason. Moreover, this quote touches on the spiritual dimension of human life. Whether through religious faith, mystical experience, or existential wonder, many people sense that life contains depths that can't be reduced to facts or theories. Hamlet's confrontation with death, grief, and the afterlife puts him in contact with those hidden dimensions. In this way, the line becomes a window into a broader human yearning for meaning that transcends the material and measurable, a universal invitation. Ultimately, this quote stands as an invitation, one that resonates across time, disciplines, and cultures. It invites us to remain curious, to resist dogma, and to embrace mystery with courage rather than fear. It warns us against mistaking the map for the territory, the model for the truth, or the system for the whole. Whether we are philosophers, scientists, artists, or seekers, Hamlet's words remind us that the universe is always more than we think it is. In that spirit, we may find that the truest philosophy is one that leaves room for awe. Leonardo's Awakening, a call to see clearly. Leonardo da Vinci famously observed, "I awoke only to find that the rest of the world was still asleep." This poignant reflection captures the essence of spiritual and intellectual awakening, a profound recognition that one's newfound clarity sets them apart from the collective slumber of society. Da Vinci, a quintessential Renaissance thinker, represents the archetypal awakened individual, one who sees clearly while others remain veiled in unconsciousness. To awaken, in the context that Da Vinci suggests, is not merely to open one's eyes physically, but to perceive reality with extraordinary depth and insight. It is a journey from passive existence toward active, purposeful living. Da Vinci, whose expansive interests spanned art, science, anatomy, engineering, and philosophy, exemplifies this active engagement with the mysteries of life. His awakening was one of boundless curiosity and fearless questioning, traits starkly contrasting the pervasive complacency of his contemporaries. Today, Da Vinci's observation remains strikingly relevant. We live amidst perpetual distraction, seduced by fleeting stimuli and shallow engagement, a kind of collective sleepwalking. The awakened individual, however, is acutely aware of this condition, compelled toward a deeper, more meaningful pursuit of knowledge and self-realization. This awakening is not without its burden. It often entails loneliness, frustration, and misunderstanding. Those who awaken find themselves navigating a society resistant to introspection and fearful of truths that challenge comfortable illusions. Nevertheless, awakening is liberating. It lifts the veils of ignorance and prejudice, empowering individuals to think independently and critically. This awakening invites compassion, empathy, and a drive for transformation, not only personally but collectively. Da Vinci's life and work embody the fruits of awakening: innovation, creativity, and profound insight into the human condition. His myriad contributions demonstrate that to awaken is to enrich not just oneself, but humanity as a whole. Leonardo's quote serves as an invitation and challenge for us all. It urges us to confront the question of our own awakenings. Are we truly awake to our lives and possibilities, or do we drift unconsciously, bound by routines and unquestioned beliefs? Da Vinci prompts us to pursue vigilance, curiosity, and authenticity. His observation reminds us that true awakening, intellectual, spiritual, or emotional, is essential for meaningful existence, distinguishing the fully alive from the merely existing. Thus, Leonardo da Vinci's declaration is not merely a statement of personal revelation, but a timeless call to humanity. Awaken, see clearly, and dare to live profoundly. King Solomon's Temple, a sacred edifice of text and tradition. King Solomon's Temple, often referred to as the First Temple, stands as one of the most iconic and significant structures in ancient history and religious tradition. While much of what we know comes from biblical accounts, particularly in the books of Kings and Chronicles, these descriptions paint a vivid picture of a magnificent edifice that served as the central place of worship for the Israelites. However, direct archaeological evidence of the First Temple remains elusive, making its reconstruction largely reliant on textual interpretations and comparative archaeology of contemporary structures. According to biblical narratives, the temple was built by King Solomon in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, the site where, according to tradition, Abraham was commanded to sacrifice Isaac. The construction, spanning 7 years in the 10th century BCE, was a monumental undertaking involving vast quantities of cedar wood from Lebanon, precious stones, and skilled craftsmen from Tyre, indicating significant wealth and diplomatic relations during Solomon's reign. The foundation was laid in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, and its completion marked a pivotal moment in Israelite history, signifying God's permanent dwelling among his people. The architectural layout of Solomon's Temple, as described in 1 Kings 6-7 and 2 Chronicles 3-4, was a long room building oriented on an east-west axis. It consisted of 3 main sections. The Ulam, portico or vestibule. This was the entrance to the temple, measuring approximately 30 feet wide and 15 feet deep. It featured 2 massive bronze pillars named Jachin and Boaz, standing at its entrance. Their exact purpose and symbolism are debated, but they likely held significant religious or royal meaning. The Haikal, holy place or main hall. Beyond the Ulam lay the main hall, roughly 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high. This was the area where daily rituals were performed by the priests. It contained the golden altar of incense, the table for showbread, and 10 golden lampstands, 5 on each side, which were said to have burned continuously. The walls were adorned with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and flowers, all overlaid with gold, suggesting a symbolic representation of a divine garden. The Dibur, Holy of Holies or inner sanctuary, this innermost and most sacred chamber was a perfect cube, approximately 30 feet in each dimension. It was separated from the Haikal by a veil and accessible only to the high priest, and that only once a year on Yom Kippur. The Holy of Holies housed the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the 2 stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. 2 enormous gold-plated cherubim, with outstretched wings touching each other and the walls, stood within this sanctum, symbolizing the divine presence. Surrounding the temple edifice were various courtyards and additional structures. The inner court, or court of the priests, housed the altar of burnt offering and was reserved for priestly activities. Beyond this, a larger outer court would have accommodated the general populace. The entire complex was designed to facilitate worship, sacrifice, and the manifestation of God's presence. The significance of Solomon's Temple in Judaism is immense. It served as the singular, divinely ordained place of worship for the Israelites, centralizing religious practices and solidifying Jerusalem's status as the spiritual and political capital. It was believed to be the dwelling place of God's glory, where God would reveal himself to his people. The temple facilitated the offering of sacrifices for atonement and the performance of rituals vital to their covenant with God. Its destruction by the Babylonians in 586 BCE was a catastrophic event that profoundly impacted Jewish identity and faith, leading to the construction of the Second Temple centuries later. In Christianity, the Temple of Solomon holds symbolic importance, often seen as a prefigurement of Christ and the Church. The Holy of Holies, where God's presence dwelt, is seen as a foreshadowing of Jesus, through whom believers now have direct access to God. The idea of the physical temple is transmuted into the concept of the church as a spiritual temple, with believers themselves forming a holy temple in the Lord, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets with Christ as the cornerstone. Despite the detailed biblical descriptions, definitive archaeological evidence for Solomon's temple remains elusive due to the continuous building and destruction on the Temple Mount over millennia, as well as the immense political and religious sensitivities surrounding any excavation in the area. While there are tantalizing hints, such as a 6th century BCE ostracon mentioning the House of Yahweh, a possible reference to the temple, and a 10th century BCE inscription potentially indicating trade with biblical Sheba, no direct structural remains of the first temple have been unearthed. Therefore, our understanding of King Solomon's temple is primarily derived from its profound textual legacy and its enduring symbolic power within religious traditions, rather than from tangible archaeological findings. The immutable and the amorphous, conceptions of heaven and the Grand Lodge. Above, my friends, after exploring ancient tales and cosmic dances, we inevitably come to one of humanity's most enduring questions. What lies beyond? What is heaven? This yearning for an afterlife, a realm beyond the veil of mortal existence, is a nearly universal facet of spiritual inquiry. While nearly all belief systems grapple with the nature of the hereafter, the specific conceptions of heaven can vary dramatically, reflecting profound theological and philosophical divergences. A compelling contrast emerges when examining the Catholic Church's deeply rooted doctrine of heaven against Freemasonry's more abstract notion of the Grand Lodge above. These two visions, while both pointing to a perfected state, reveal fundamental differences in their understanding of divinity, salvation, and the ultimate destiny of the human soul. Catholic heaven, union with the triune God. Catholic teaching on heaven is meticulously defined and central to its soteriology, its understanding of salvation. It is fundamentally understood as the state of supreme, definitive happiness, the ultimate end and fulfillment of the deepest human longings. The Catechism of the Catholic Church defines heaven as the perfect life with the Most Holy Trinity, this communion of life and love with the Trinity, with the Virgin Mary, the angels, and all the blessed. At its core, heaven is the beatific vision, the immediate, intuitive, and perfect knowledge and contempt of God, seeing Him face to face, 1 Cor 13:12. This is not merely a place, but a state of being in radical union with God, where every longing is fulfilled and joy is absolute. Entrance into this state is contingent upon dying in God's grace and friendship, fully purified of sin, whether in this life or through purgation after death. Importantly, salvation in Catholicism is achieved through Christ alone, His redemptive sacrifice on the cross, and the grace received through faith, good works, and the sacraments, especially baptism and the Eucharist. The glorified body will be reunited with the soul at the final judgment, experiencing the same ecstasy as the soul, perfected and free from suffering or imperfection. For a Catholic, heaven is a divinely revealed destination, a participation in the very life of God, a communion born of specific divine acts and human responses of faith and love. Freemasonry's Grand Lodge above, continuing the work. In stark contrast, Freemasonry's concept of the Grand Lodge above is far less dogmatic and considerably more abstract, reflecting its nature as a fraternal organization rather than a religion. While Freemasonry requires its initiates to believe in a supreme being, often referred to as the Grand Architect of the Universe, or GEO2, and in the immortality of the soul, it deliberately refrains from prescribing a specific theological pathway to the afterlife. The Grand Lodge above is generally understood as a symbolic, ethereal assembly of worthy Masons who, having completed their earthly labors, continue their spiritual journey in a higher spiritual realm. It is an ideal, a continuation of the Masonic principles of self-improvement, moral conduct, and brotherly love, envisioned as existing beyond the confines of terrestrial lodges. The notion is less about a specific divine presence or a beatific vision of God, and more about the ongoing perfection of the individual soul and its integration into a higher cosmic order of Masonic work and fellowship. Entry into this Grand Lodge above is often seen as a consequence of living a moral life and adhering to Masonic tenets, with the specific details of the afterlife left to the individual Mason's personal religious beliefs. For a Mason, the Grand Lodge above represents a continuity of moral and spiritual growth, a place for all who have lived worthily according to their conscience and Masonic principles, regardless of their specific faith tradition. The fundamental divergence, revelation versus universal principles. The fundamental divergence between these two conceptions of the afterlife stems from their foundational premises. Catholicism, as a revealed religion, posits a specific divine being, the triune God, a particular path to salvation through Christ, and a detailed eschatology rooted in Scripture and tradition. Freemasonry, conversely, is explicitly not a religion, though it contains religious elements and symbolism. It emphasizes universal morality, self-improvement, and fraternity, drawing upon various spiritual traditions without endorsing any one as exclusively true. Its Grand Lodge above is therefore a broad, inclusive symbol that accommodates a multitude of personal beliefs about the afterlife, rather than defining it. This difference has profound implications. The Catholic Church's condemnation of Freemasonry, which has remained consistent for centuries, largely stems from this fundamental clash. The Church views Freemasonry's indifferentism, the idea that all religions are equally valid paths to God, as a direct contradiction to the unique and salvific role of Jesus Christ and the necessity of the Church for salvation. In conclusion, while both Catholicism and Masonry offer a vision of a perfected state beyond earthly life, their conceptions of heaven are markedly distinct. Catholic heaven is a divinely revealed communion with the triune God, achieved through Christ and grace, promising the beatific vision. The Masonic Grand Lodge above is a symbolic continuation of the individual's moral and spiritual journey, accommodating diverse religious beliefs about the afterlife. The contrast highlights not merely different ideas about what awaits us beyond the grave, but fundamentally different epistemologies, anthropologies, and soteriologies, underscoring why these two venerable institutions, despite superficial similarities in their pursuit of moral good, ultimately remain at theological odds regarding the ultimate destiny of the human soul. They are both reaching for the immutable light, but through very different architectural designs of belief. The enigma of Melchizedek, king, priest, and a glimpse of something more. One of the most intriguing and mysterious figures in the Hebrew Bible is Melchizedek. He makes a brief yet incredibly significant appearance in Genesis 14:18-20. King of Salem and priest of El Elyon, Melchizedek is described as the king of Salem, widely believed to be an early name for Jerusalem, and a priest of El Elyon, often translated as God Most High or the Lord God Most High. This immediately sets him apart, as he holds both royal and priestly authority. Encounter with Abraham. After Abraham's victory over the kings who had captured Lot, Melchizedek comes out to meet him. He brings out bread and wine, an act often seen as one of hospitality and blessing. Blessing and tithe. Melchizedek then blesses Abraham, acknowledging El Elyon as the possessor of heaven and earth, and the one who delivered Abraham's enemies into his hand. In response, Abraham gives Melchizedek a tenth of everything, a tithe. This act of tithing to Melchizedek signifies Abraham's recognition of Melchizedek's superior spiritual authority. Why is Melchizedek so important? His sudden appearance, powerful position, and interaction with Abraham without any stated genealogy or origin make him unique. In later biblical tradition, particularly in Psalm 110:4 and extensively in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, Melchizedek is presented as a prototype or foreshadowing of Christ. A priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, Psalm 110:4 prophesies of a future king-priest in the order of Melchizedek. This is highly significant because in Israel, the priesthood was later established exclusively through the tribe of Levi, the Levitical priesthood. Melchizedek's existence as a priest before the Mosaic Law and the Levitical order points to a different, pre-existing, and perhaps superior priesthood. Foreshadowing Christ. The book of Hebrews emphasizes Melchizedek's without father or mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God. He remains a priest forever, Hebrews 7:3. This isn't necessarily suggesting he was immortal in a literal sense, but rather that the biblical narrative presents him without the usual human limitations of lineage and lifespan, allowing him to serve as a powerful symbol for Jesus Christ, who is eternal and serves as both our king and high priest. Melchizedek's story reminds us of God's universal reach, extending beyond established systems and foreshadowing the ultimate high priest, Jesus Christ. He's a fascinating character who continues to spark theological discussion and contemplation. The phrase priest forever after the order of Melchizedek and its symbolic connection to the Masonic fraternity. The phrase priest forever after the order of Melchizedek carries significant theological weight, particularly within Christianity. Its relationship to the history of the Masonic fraternity is more symbolic and allegorical than direct. Significance in Judaism and Christianity. Old Testament, Melchizedek's brief appearance is notable because he is a priest who predates the Levitical priesthood established through Aaron. Psalm 110:4 later states, "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, in the order of Melchizedek." This verse is highly significant for its messianic implications. New Testament, Hebrews. The epistle to the Hebrews in the New Testament heavily emphasizes Melchizedek's significance. It argues that Jesus Christ is the ultimate high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. The author of Hebrews highlights several points. Superiority. Melchizedek's priesthood is superior to the Levitical priesthood because Abraham, the ancestor of the Levites, paid tithes to Melchizedek. Eternity without genealogy. Melchizedek is presented as without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, which the author of Hebrews uses to illustrate the eternal nature of Christ's priesthood, unlike the temporary, lineage-based Aaronic priesthood. King and priest. Melchizedek's dual role as king and priest prefigures Jesus, who is both king and high priest. New covenant. This new superior priesthood signifies a new covenant, replacing the old covenant of the Mosaic law. In essence, a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek refers to a priesthood that is eternal, superior, non-lineal in the traditional sense, and combines the roles of king and priest, ultimately pointing to Jesus Christ in Christian theology. Relationship to the history of the Masonic fraternity. The connection between Melchizedek and Freemasonry is not direct in the sense of a historical lineage or foundational doctrine, but rather appears in symbolic and allegorical ways within certain Masonic rites and philosophical interpretations. Key points regarding Freemasonry's history and its relation to biblical themes. Origins. Freemasonry's origins are widely believed to stem from the medieval guilds of stonemasons, operative masons, and later evolved into speculative, symbolic Freemasonry, which adopted the tools and practices of the trade as allegories for moral and ethical development. Biblical allusions. While Freemasonry is not a religion, it draws heavily on biblical narratives and figures for its symbolism and moral teachings. The building of King Solomon's Temple is a central allegory in craft Freemasonry. The first 3 degrees, entered apprentice, fellowcraft, and master mason. Hiram Abiff, the master craftsman of Solomon's Temple, is a crucial figure in the master mason degree. Belief in a supreme being. A fundamental requirement for membership in regular Freemasonry is a belief in a supreme being, often referred to as the great architect of the universe. However, Freemasonry does not prescribe a specific religion or dogma, allowing members of various faiths to participate. Higher degrees and appendant bodies. Beyond the 3 craft degrees, there are numerous appendant bodies or higher degrees in Freemasonry, such as the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, explore different philosophical, historical, and religious themes. It is within these more advanced degrees that biblical figures and concepts, including potentially Melchizedek, might be introduced or alluded to in more specific ways. Some esoteric or philosophical Masonic interpretations might connect the concept of a universal priesthood or a timeless spiritual wisdom to figures like Melchizedek, seeing him as a symbol of an ancient universal truth, or a priestly lineage not tied to specific religious institutions. While not a core element of mainstream craft Freemasonry, some Masonic scholars or individual Masons might draw parallels between the king-priest aspect of Melchizedek and the pursuit of moral leadership and spiritual understanding within the fraternity. In summary, there is no direct historical line or doctrinal teaching in core Freemasonry that claims a descent from or direct association with Melchizedek's priesthood. The connection, if made, would typically be found in the symbolic interpretations within certain appendant bodies or in the broader philosophical musings of individual Masons who see parallels between biblical figures and Masonic ideals of self-improvement, moral conduct, and a belief in a divine architect. Freemasonry generally focuses on building character and promoting brotherly love, relief, and truth, using allegories and symbols many of which are drawn from biblical sources but interpreted in a non-sectarian manner. The inner path, cultivating well-being through self-reliance and deep listening. Optimism versus optimal behavior, the Buddhist path to well-being. Optimism, often characterized by a disposition to expect the best and see the glass half full, is undoubtedly a powerful human trait. It can foster resilience, motivate perseverance, and contribute to a generally more pleasant, subjective experience of life. Yet, there's a crucial distinction to be made between being an optimist and being an optimal behaviorist, a distinction that finds deep resonance within Buddhist teachings. While optimism is a mindset, optimal behaviorism is an active, volitional engagement with life, built on the premise that well-being is a direct consequence of skillful action, day in and day out. An optimist might simply hope for good outcomes or believe that things will turn out all right. Their focus is often on the external outcome, and their positive outlook, while beneficial, doesn't necessarily guarantee the necessary effort or wisdom to achieve those desired results. An optimal behaviorist, on the other hand, understands that feeling well isn't a matter of passive expectation, but a result of consistent, conscious, and beneficial behavior. They grasp the direct causal link. If you behave well, you will feel well. This isn't a naive wish, but a practical philosophy of living. This distinction aligns perfectly with the core tenets of Buddhist thought, particularly the doctrine of kamma, karma. In Buddhism, kamma is not a mystical force or divine judgment, but simply the law of cause and effect applied to volitional actions. Every intentional thought, word, and deed creates a corresponding ripple, shaping not only external circumstances, but, more importantly, the inner landscape of one's mind and heart. Positive, wholesome actions lead to positive, wholesome results, a feeling of well-being, peace, and contentment. Conversely, negative, unskillful actions lead to suffering, unease, and discontent. The Buddha's teachings emphasize the power of intention, satana. It is not merely the outward act, but the underlying motivation that determines the kammic result. An optimal behaviorist, therefore, isn't just performing good actions superficially, they are cultivating wholesome intentions. They understand that generosity, kindness, patience, and ethical conduct are not just moral imperatives, but practical strategies for cultivating genuine happiness. Each conscious choice to act with compassion, to speak truthfully, or to think with clarity is a brick laid in the foundation of their own well-being. Unlike a purely optimistic approach that might dismiss obstacles or pain as temporary aberrations, optimal behaviorism, rooted in Buddhist wisdom, acknowledges the reality of suffering, dukkha. However, it offers a path to transcend suffering not through wishful thinking, but through diligent cultivation of wholesome habits. The Noble Eightfold Path, for instance, is a comprehensive guide to optimal behavior, encompassing right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Each aspect is a direct instruction for living in a way that generates inner peace and liberation. To be an optimal behaviorist, in this sense, is to embody the spirit of the Buddha's dying words, "Be a lamp unto yourself." It's a call to take full responsibility for one's inner state by consciously shaping one's actions. It recognizes that true and lasting well-being is not a gift bestowed from external forces or a matter of mere positive thinking, but a meticulously constructed reality, built one skillful thought, word, and deed at a time. It's a dynamic and empowering approach to life, where every moment presents an opportunity to choose behavior that leads to flourishing, proving, day by day, that if you behave well, you will feel well. Honoring the unique path, the wisdom of deep listening. We all navigate life on our own unique terms, propelled by an internal compass that charts a deeply personal course. There's a profound wisdom in recognizing that everyone has their own destiny and their own way. Just as a river carves its own path to the sea, each individual forges their journey, encountering challenges and triumphs that are uniquely theirs. It's a common human impulse to want to guide or protect others, to offer advice born from our own experiences. However, we often forget that people can only hear what they are ready to learn. A seed only sprouts when the conditions are right. Similarly, a lesson resonates only when the mind and spirit are receptive. Force-feeding wisdom is like trying to bloom a flower in winter. It's an exercise in futility that can even be detrimental. This understanding leads to a crucial realization. None of us know what is best for any soul and their enlightenment. Our perspectives are inherently limited by our own journeys, biases, and individual understandings of the world. What might be a stepping stone for one person could be a stumbling block for another. True growth and enlightenment are not externally imposed but internally cultivated. Each soul's path to awakening is intricate and unique, and trying to dictate it is an act of presumption. Given this, our main objective should be listening. Not listening with the intent to reply, to fix, or to offer unsolicited solutions, but listening with an open heart and mind. Listening to understand, to witness, and to hold space for another's unfolding. When we truly listen, we honor the autonomy of the individual, allowing them the dignity of their own process. We create an environment where they feel safe to explore, to stumble, and ultimately to discover their own truths. In this act of deep listening, we not only respect their journey, but also open ourselves to the possibility of learning something new about the vast and varied tapestry of human experience. Be a lamp unto yourself, the Buddha's ultimate call to inner awakening. In the quietude preceding his parinirvana, the Buddha's final utterance resonates with an enduring power, transcending the centuries, to offer a profound directive. Be a lamp unto yourself. This isn't merely a poetic turn of phrase, it's a distillation of his entire teaching, an ultimate affirmation of individual agency and the inherent capacity for enlightenment residing within each being. It speaks to a self-sufficiency that bypasses external dependencies, urging us to look inward for the answers we seek, rather than to prophets, scriptures, or rituals. At first glance, the admonition to be a lamp unto yourself might seem to contradict the traditional understanding of a spiritual leader. Most faiths revolve around the guidance of a divine being or an enlightened master. Yet, the Buddha, on his deathbed, gently dismantled this very expectation. He wasn't bequeathing a lineage of infallible gurus or an exhaustive set of dogmas to blindly follow. Instead, he was pointing to the wellspring of wisdom that exists within the human heart and mind. He was, in essence, saying that the path to liberation isn't found by following someone else's light, but by igniting your own. This radical self-reliance is not an invitation to isolation or an endorsement of unchecked ego. Rather, it's a call to cultivate mindfulness and discernment. The lamp refers to the light of understanding, the clarity that arises from direct experience and diligent inquiry. It's the ability to critically examine one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions, and to perceive the impermanent and interdependent nature of reality. It means taking responsibility for one's own spiritual journey, actively engaging with the teachings not as rigid commandments, but as guideposts for personal exploration. The Buddha's final words underscore the conviction that everything necessary for awakening already exists within us. We are not born empty vessels awaiting an external filling, but rather contain the seeds of wisdom, compassion, and liberation. The journey, then, is not one of acquisition, but of uncovering, peeling back the layers of delusion, attachment, and ignorance that obscure our true nature. It's a process of self-discovery, of recognizing the inherent purity and potential that lies dormant within the heart and mind. In a world increasingly reliant on external validation and quick-fix solutions, the Buddha's dying words serve as a potent reminder. They challenge us to cultivate inner resilience, to trust our own intuition, and to diligently practice the path of self-awareness. To be a lamp unto oneself is to understand that the ultimate authority resides not outside, but within. That the power to transform suffering into peace and ignorance into wisdom is already our birthright, waiting to be illuminated. It is a timeless message of empowerment, urging each of us to become our own beacon in the vast ocean of existence. The heart of all being, when love is the universe itself. Introduction, the unfolding embrace. For too long, we have caged love. We have called it an emotion, a fleeting sentiment, a chemical reaction, a personal attachment. We have reduced it to the fragile confines of human relationships, often marred by expectation and pain. But what if this narrow view is akin to mistaking a single drop for the ocean? What if love isn't just something we feel, but the very fabric of what is? Imagine for a moment that the universe isn't a cold, indifferent machine governed by impersonal laws of physics. What if instead it's a living, breathing love story in motion? A cosmic dance of connection, creation, and unfolding wonder, powered by an intelligent, compassionate force that we, in our limited human language, can only begin to grasp as love. This isn't an essay of sentimental platitudes. This is an invitation to reperceive reality itself, to dismantle the mechanistic worldview and open to a universe pulsating with inherent connection, profound generosity, and an irresistible impulse towards unity.